Welcome to Dolby Creator Talks. This is a show about how artists use technology to tell their stories, and I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Once again, it is Emmys season. Recently, I had the opportunity to moderate a panel discussion with the sound artists behind some of the boldest new Netflix productions to discuss the ways they approach their work to tell these exciting and innovative stories. Joining the discussion from Adolescence is supervising sound editor James Drake. From American Primeval, sound designer Wylie Stateman, along with co-supervising sound editor and music editor Anna Jimkes-Root. From the animated anthology series Love, Death, and Robots, returning to the podcast once again, sound designer Brad North. And from the action thriller feature film Rebel Ridge, we have re-recording mixer Drew Webster. We had this conversation in front of a packed audience at Netflix headquarters in Hollywood. Before we spoke, we watched a short clip reel our friends at Netflix put together to highlight some of the work in these amazing shows. So here's the reel, and then we will jump right into the conversation.
Police! Get down on the floor!
What's going on?
I've
got you on my
I haven't done anything. Look, you've got the wrong house, I'm telling you. You're making a big mistake. What are you looking for?
Police suspect found! Show me your hands! Get your hands in the air! Get your hands in the fucking air so I can see them now!
Hey, me talking to you. What are you
My name
doing?
is D.I. Bascom. I have a warrant to search your premises, sir. Where's your son? Where's your son?
He's in his bedroom. What do you need me for?
Where is he?
Mom!
Hey, he's on your head, bitch.
He's got the wrong house.
Okay.
Hey,
Jamie Miller.
what's going on?
The time is 6:15 a.m. and I'm arresting you on suspicion of murder.
I'm not sure who to shoot at.
Then maybe don't shoot.
Stand out, boys. Stay alert. Something ain't right. They know we're coming. How they know we're coming?
Before we dive into the specifics of each show, I wanted to kind of just start with a general question for all of you, and I would love for you to just take a moment and talk about, sound is such obviously a key element of the storytelling of each one of these shows. But I would love for you to talk a little bit about your relationship with the director or sound runner who was your principal kind of creative lead on the show. I'm very curious for each of you, sort of what was that initial creative conversation? Were there any guiding principles that kind of took you through the process of creating the sound for these? And James, if you could start us off with Adolescence, please.
I've worked with Phil since his first short film. So for 7 or 8 years now. And we were in an ADR session on another project, and he said, we're doing this one-shot series. And the initial kind of feeling is your stomach going, we've done it with Boiling Point. It was a big technical challenge. We're going to do it again, but we're going to do it in, 4 times, and it's going to be a TV series. And the ideas that he said about episode 1 were way beyond anything that we'd tried before. But he's a great director, great leader, and he's the maestro of those projects. And it's you're in safe hands, and it's exciting.
Anna, how about you with American Primeval?
So my first time working with Peter Berg, the director for our series, was actually on Painkiller. But even before then, Wylie has had a much longer relationship with Pete, and so my relationship very much came from what they had already built up, and the trust that came from that.
We'll tag team this.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Your story is my story.
Yeah. Pete Berg is a really interesting character. He's an actor, a writer, a director, a producer. And if you have all of those things in one person, you always know who to go to ask a question or to get a yes or, on occasion a no. Really enjoyed what Pete wanted to do. He was making not a Western, but a movie about survival and hardship that took place in the American West. And so for him, it was really important to have these textures right. It was really important to have a lot of grit and a lot of push and pull. And I think we'll discuss that when we talk about the music. But fantastic working with somebody who can make decisions, who has the authority to spend money, to direct talent, and who clearly has a vision. So
somebody who has the authority to spend money and has a clear creative vision. What a unique gift
it's a
that you had on this,
really.
Wylie. Brad, how about you and Love, Death, and Robots?
Yeah, so the head creatives are Tim Miller and David Fincher. And Tim Miller is kind of the main voice of the show. But the difference between this and all the other stuff that we all work on is that this is an anthology. So all the shows are made from different producers and different directors and different editors and all of that. So
I've got some questions for you about that process too. We'll dive into that.
Yeah. So this director was Robert Wylie, and he had done an episode on season 1, which was great. And then he did season 2 or season 3 episode, and then this one. So we had a little bit of a rapport. So when he said start at 11, I knew what he meant. But there's a lot of creative voices in this show. But Tim is the guy.
Drew, tell us a little bit about Rebel Ridge.
Our director, Jeremy, was the writer, director, and picture editor. So he absolutely knew what he wanted at all times. So, there was never any question about anything other than just do what he wants and match the Avid track.
Okay, we'll come back to that. Yeah, I've got some questions about that. James, let's dive into Adolescence. You mentioned part of the key creative concept is that each episode plays out in a oneer. So you don't have that whole trope of using sound in transitions the way that you would on a more traditionally shot and covered show. So tell us a little bit about the challenges of that and how you kind of navigated you've also got, as we saw in that clip, these sequences of just extraordinary tension and how you use the sound design to maintain and build that tension.
I think really early on, Phil always said that it was about naturalism and kind of grit and reality. So, yeah, very early on, it was very much like keep everything as real as you can, and then we'll work and build and shape from there. I mean, luckily they did such an amazing job filming it that it was kind of edited with a flow and a sense already. So what we were doing then was just adding to it and shaping and moving those moments of tension further and closer away when we needed to. Yeah, it was kind of a joy to do, because we had a blank canvas, that there was no edits, that there was no music, there was nothing. It was just a mono guide track. And then we went in and started building layers, and then worked out, can we move in someone's head here? Can we move the world away at this point? And it's gentle. It's just very gentle at all times. Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I had a question about that. And so I'd love for you to kind of elaborate on that. I'm glad that they picked the sequence that they did to show, which is sort of, storming the house. And
yeah, that's not gentle. Sorry.
That show starts off with such a bang, but you also have in that first episode some really lovely moments where you use the sound design to get into the internal states of the characters. I'd made a couple of notes that when Jamie's taken into custody, you get a little bit of his sound POV when you're in the car, and everything becomes sort of muffled and internal. And I love those moments when you're kind of giving the audience the subjective experience that the character's having. So talk about carving those moments out and designing those. Like his dad has a moment like that in the police station as well.
The van's a really interesting one. So what you hear there is score, but originally it was sound design. The clock you hear, we were filming episode 2 and we were starting to work on episode 1, and Phil came in and said, we need to do some work on the van. We need to take it somewhere. So originally what was there was that clock sound and various layers of cellos and strings warped and changed. And then Aaron and David, brilliant composers, they went and made that amazing bit of score, but we still had that original sound of that clock ticking. Because Phil became so attached to it. And then when we go into the police station, when we move into Jamie's head, I mean, my favourite time that we do it in episode 1 is where we do the opposite, where Eddie, Stephen Graham's character, is in the nurse's room and they're about to examine Jamie. And it's this, horrendous moment of a father, watching, his son, or being present when his son is being strip searched. And really, like, instantly Phil and I both had the same kind of thing of, we just have to take all sound away. So all those layers of room tone and rattling fans, they all just get very slowly subtracted as the camera moves into Stephen, and you just have his breath, and then you just have the Foley and the voices in the background. And it's, it's hard to work on. It's quite harrowing, but hopefully it really works. And definitely in the mix, lots of people said how it hit home. Yeah,
it's incredibly powerful. And without necessarily getting into spoilers for what comes after episode 1, tell us a little bit about how the approach to storytelling through sound kind of evolves over the course of the 4 episodes.
Every episode is very different. We are jumping through various moments in time throughout that story. So I guess the overall approach of reality, and again, still trying to move into people's heads when we need to, happens, but we kind of just approached every episode as, we're in a new place. How does it feel? We never return to the same locations, at least in the same way. We returned to the Miller house in episode 4, but it's, a year and a bit later, and a little bit brighter at first, then a little bit darker. The approach was really just to make 4 distinct episodes which all felt like Adolescence, but had a sonic mark which made you feel like you were in the school in episode 2, and you were really in that school, and it was claustrophobic and busy, and then sparse, and then heavy, and moving through all of these emotions in one episode. 3 is really trying to be very gentle and very subtle and just support those amazing performances. And then 4 is actually kind of an amalgamation of all 4 episodes, and we do everything in that episode.
You touched on this, and we'll definitely get an opportunity for you all to talk about this on your shows. But I'm always fascinated by the interplay of music and sound design. So, can you talk a little bit about sort of the rules of the rules of the road for Adolescence in the show, and how you were using that kind of dance between sound design and score?
The earliest conversations we had was that perhaps there wouldn't be score at all.
Which kind of makes sense because it's a naturalistic sort of, it plays out, each episode plays out in a oneer. So it would make sense that you would flirt with that approach of like, let's see if we can do this without any music.
Yeah, and we did with Boiling Point, apart from diegetic music, and we knew that it worked, and we knew we could hold an audience. But then Aaron and David started with episode 3 and started exploring ideas, and it really helped support the internal worlds that that Phil wanted to kind of bring out at certain times. The big thing with the music is that we, apart from like at one point, we don't hard cut. Like, because it's a oneer, we're really trying to move music incredibly subtly in, so the audience doesn't know that the music is there until suddenly it's there. And the same with the sound is that you're really trying to not shout and say we're doing sound right now. It's just trying to support it. Yeah.
Let's move on to American Primeval. Wylie and Anna. Hollywood's had obviously a very long tradition of the Western, a love affair with the Western, if you will. But this is not a typical Western. Wylie, you talked about it as being very gritty, but I would love for you to kind of talk about the approach to the sound design and the philosophy of sound and storytelling in the show, and also kind of how you also collaborate, how you two work together.
American Western is a very tried and true, kind of genre. And typically it was done with big orchestra, beautiful vistas, the long ride up, the long ride away. There's certain cliche things in Westerns, it starts from giddy up and it ends at whoa, But what Pete wanted was to shoot in that environment, to shoot entirely outdoors, mostly with natural light. And in terms of sound, what you have is a war zone, because you have 150 people behind the camera. You have all of these departments dressing beautiful outdoor sets. You have, the camera crew shooting with 5 different cameras. But the poor sound crew on location is just 2 guys, holding boom microphones when we're lucky to have 2, and a production mixer. So by its nature, it's sort of a very visual medium. But by Pete's nature, he wanted this to be really a personal survival story and a conflict between the native tribes of the 1850s, the Mormon settlers in that part of the country, a massacre that's actually a documented event called the Mountain Meadows Massacre, and the cavalry. And so you have these wonderful, ensemble tribes, all pitted against each other. And then what we did to try and make it different was to be very honest about it, be very, to leave it raw, to leave it broken, to not overproduce it the way a typical Western would kind of look and feel.
Yeah, I mean, really the only Western about it is where it takes place, and it's in the mid-1850s. But other than that, at the heart of it, it's a mother trying to protect her son and bringing him into safety while they're being chased. Another part of this that's not, again, embracing that typical Western is the music side of things. I mean, Pete, when he came to us with this script that already promised some interesting, very raw and visceral sound work, knew that he wanted to work with Explosions in the Sky for the score. He first worked with them on Friday Night Lights many years ago and just fell in love with them and their music. And they're just such amazing artists. But they're not your typical traditional composers, nor do they write symphonic orchestral score. There are 3 guys on guitar, sometimes keyboard, and then 1 on drums. And they make these moods, these riffs, these wailing guitar textures, no vocals or anything. And so in a way it lends itself well for film score, but was interesting from our point of view in inserting ourselves in that process is to become sort of a liaison between the band and the picture editors, and then also the rest of the sound team. And in terms of conversations with Pete, the core of the score was to be this pulse, this constant sense of movement and unrelenting anxiety in this world that's just never letting go of any danger that's right around the corner. And so that, again, was not going to be pretty strings. That was a kick drum. That was a pluck of a bass or bowing a guitar string.
I'm kind of curious, since they're not necessarily known for film scoring. What was the process of working with them on the score? Did you have rough versions of it as you were doing your sound editorial and design to kind of work off of, or did it all come in as a train wreck at the last minute, or what was the actual process?
Well, it was actually, we started with the music. On this, yes. And even before there was any footage available, when we just had the scripts, they started writing these suites. And they delivered those so I could work with them once we got some scenes together. And we start the process very early in that sense with the cutting room. So as soon as 2 scenes are cut together, we can start building a mix. And we work with all the elements in one master session. So as I was bringing these suites into the edits to then inform further thematic ideas and further develop this pulse that it evolves and changes along with the characters throughout the 6 episodes, we knew if anything needed to be touched on dialogue, or hey, once we have dialogue in place and this music's playing around it, we could use a little bit of effects here. So let's bring in some effects there and build this palette of sound just through that iterative process and really looking in a holistic view at all the pieces.
Go ahead, Wylie.
Yeah, just to put a finer point on that, we look at the sound post-production process as a parallel process to cutting picture. So, and in fact, it's a parallel process to almost writing the script for a lot of filmmakers. And so it's the beginning of the process is always dialogue, music, and effects, and it's an additive process so that you just look at a scene and you try and understand the vocabulary of the write-up, the wide shot, what we're going to present the music there. So we really don't want it to compete with very much. And so it's a very sparse but very, what's the word?
Orchestrated chaos.
Yeah. But there's a lot of precision to these handoffs, and that's really where sound, I think, excels, where it's about clarity. It's about clarity in combination to story, but the process of working in parallel with the picture cut is a really interesting way to make a Western, or to make any film for that matter. But this is something that we've really sort of enjoyed doing with filmmakers as part of their filmmaking team in the cutting room.
I'm very curious about the collaboration between the two of you. How do you work together? Are there certain moments that you kind of say like, oh, I want Wylie to focus on some elements here, or sort of what's the collaboration between the two of you in the design phase and then during the mix phase as well?
I'm just going to lead with that because the collaboration is from beginning to end. And so we're always working with the dialogue, the music, and the sound effects. And so none of us really live in a vacuum. There will be somebody cutting backgrounds, let's say, but they're cutting backgrounds against the music. And if there's music, then we need something sympathetic to the music. If there's dialogue, we need to leave room for the dialogue and deal with the challenges of how the dialogue was recorded on the set.
Yeah, and the two of us work with a small team of other sound professionals with Austin Roth, Trevor Kress, Elliot Hartley, and Lee Sobel. And we all are leaders in what we do. We take responsibility over certain aspects of the mix, but we're constantly talking with each other. I was focusing a lot of the music, but then also involved in the mix and the design and the dialogue. Trevor and Austin built a lot of the effects work, but they also mixed at the same time. And then Elliot is really good with weaving these dialogue pieces at like Fort Bridger, for example, where there's all these languages and you got to push and pull on what's going on. And Wylie kind of is this glue between us all. And I always say the creative genius, but I mean, he won't admit to that.
And I say I'm the clarifier. Every scene, in terms of sound needs to be clarified. What do we want the audience to listen to and how do we want them to feel? And to do that, you can't have dense layers. You have to have a parade or a progression of sounds that progress from one to the other. And it doesn't matter whether at that point it's dialogue or music or sound effects. It has to all fit into this little package. And I used to have a producer that would say, and I'd go, "It's okay?" I go, "It's okay." He'd go, "It has to come out of a speaker this big." So ultimately, that's, what we do. We make movies for subscribers.
I love the battle sequence that they pulled for the clip, but there's so many great sound sequences in that episode 6. But I have to tell you, one of my favorite moments from the sound in that episode was the wolf attack sequence on the cabin. Tell me a little bit about that's not something that you can just ring up the Foley department and have them create the sounds of a wolves breaking their way through the wooden walls of a cabin. So please tell us a little bit about the creation of the sound for that sequence.
Well, an important aspect of that particular scene was that at the beginning, we shouldn't know what is outside, what is approaching, because leading up to that point, we've seen all these groups chasing each other for different reasons and with a lot of violence. So we know that there's a lot of danger out there, both human, nature, animal. So that was a big part of the design approach, is how can we make this feel dangerous but not specific? And that specificity just grew as they come closer and deeper into the cabin, but also then to not get too obvious with, for example, the music, get ahead of it in a lot of ways of what's going to happen, but instead have a response to the action.
And that scene on location was the most beautiful wolf dogs with prosthetics in their mouths and their tails wagging. And so that's what we start with. And I'm glad you enjoyed what we ended up with, but it's all movie magic. Yeah.
Brad, let's talk about murderous babies. Love Death and
No
Robots.
hyper-realism in this.
Yeah. I've loved
No
Death and
reality
Robots.
in this.
From my perspective as a sound nerd, it's such a fantastic show. But I'm kind of curious for you from a process standpoint, because it's an anthology series and you're working with different directors on each. Do you ever get into a groove? Like you can never sort of just like kind of get into a 6-episode cycle of trying to figure. You're having to recreate and the links are obviously all over the place. Some of the episodes are 5 minutes long. This particular one is 15. Some of them are half hour, 40 minutes. So it's really kind of, that's another sort of magical thing about Netflix, right? Is you don't necessarily have to hit a specific runtime. You can give the length to the right amount of length for the story. But I'm kind of curious for you, sort of from a production standpoint, how do you even get into a groove with a season like this?
There is no groove. No, it's all different. I mean, the first season was 18 episodes and it was so much work. And yeah, there was a time where I was only working on Love, Death, and Robots for a month or so at a time. Later on, when the seasons were like 10 episodes or so, then I can just kind of space it out and make it work schedule wise. But as far as like a flow, there's not really a flow at all. What we would try to do is to keep the big ones by themselves, keep them, maybe combine some medium ones, and then load up on the smaller ones. But yeah, there's just no flow. There's no real language. I just hope that it does sound like one show. And I think with having like one person to drive this thing and also having the same mixers, I think having those 3 people on top, that has kind of given it its own signature, whatever that would be. But they all have their own different things. No hyper-realism on this. There's anything like that. It's just crazy. It's all crazy stuff.
Especially with animation, as this episode is. Not all the episodes are animated, obviously, but this one is. But they actually all are.
They are.
Very,
I mean,
very
there's 2 of them. There was one in season 1 that was mostly live action. Tim did that one. And there was a live action one in this one, and Tim actually directed that one as well. But it's live action with like an alien walking.
Heavily augmented live action.
Yeah.
But with animation like this, all the world building really falls on your shoulders. So talk a little bit about the approach to the sound design, and maybe a little bit about those babies.
Yeah, sure. So this one was kind of a bigger one. Not exactly lengthwise. I think the length of it was about 12 minutes, but it's very, very full. I kind of just chipped away at this one, to be honest with you. We had a spotting session with the director, and he had his notes and they were good. We'll talk about the baby. The script said 100-foot babies, golden babies is what it said. And, my mind is cranking just like these guys. It's like, what kind of creatures do I steal from? What do I need to record? All that sort of stuff. But we had our spotting session and he goes, they're 100-foot babies and we've temped in these like pitch down babies and we love it. Great. That was great. So that's kind of where we started. Some of them I didn't even touch. Like they're just pitched babies. That's it. So like one of them that has like really bad, sad face. It just looks like it ate a lemon and is, doing that. It's seriously just a baby going. Some of the bigger ones, I think you had the first one up here. Obviously had to top that with other stuff because it blasts this, sound wave. So it had to be a little bit more than just a brrr. So that was one of the directions. One of the directions literally was start at 11. So it's difficult to design with that type of direction. Very hard on the mix. But I think that we found a pretty cool spot in some of these things. I think you guys saw the spot where they start their telekinesis power thing and they're yelling and then it's hitting all the babies and all that sort of stuff. We were protecting some of the screams and the dialogue too much. And it's not a real narrative episode. It doesn't really need to have dialogue up front.
Yeah, once you get the idea of what the episode is going to be,
exactly.
you're kind of in for the ride.
So when you're pre-dubbing this stuff and you have these people like screaming, you want to touch the red a little bit, but in the final, actually diving it down helped us out, not only to give us room sonically, but to say that's not important. What's important are these crazy telekinesis powers and all these electro things, and then like a giant baby like being disemboweled. It's not about the screams.
And obviously the visual style of the animation is very stylized. Mm-hmm. And so I'm kind of curious for you, did that open up any possibilities? You can go pretty abstract then with the sound design as well.
Yeah. And you were talking about kind of the show as a whole. I kind of just let the episode tell me what to do. Because some of them are like, there's a new one in this season that kind of went to, it was like a reprieve of a previous episode. It's the mini aliens. And it used to be mini dead. It was mini zombies. So, it's like, and you just play those moments and you just kind of mess around with that. And then it's just kind of
favorite. I love that episode.
It's great. And those directors are great. And we have a good time recording the dialogue because we do different pitch stuff while we're recording it. But, on stuff like this, it's just big and you try to find your spots. Sometimes I actually will call for help. So this director, he did an episode in season 2 called Ice, and it was really cool. I really liked it a lot. And Wylie's pal, Harry Cohen, helped me out on it. And honestly, that kind of helped us on their next project, which was this one. The first one that director did, he did some temp stuff. I topped it. We kind of found it's a minimal type of thing. Their second one was much bigger, so I had Harry help out, and he just built a world out of it. And so that kind of put me in a good spot for the third one. It does help when we do have repeat storylines or repeat filmmakers. There's a little bit of continuity there, but yeah, still no flow. We're still just like, here's an episode, figure it out.
Drew, let's talk about Rebel Ridge for a moment. Obviously the clip that we saw was kind of the big climactic shootout sequence between our hero and the police, who, spoiler alert, are not the good guys in this film. But the movie starts in a very, very different way. I mean, obviously, I love when we can showcase some of the big moments, but it starts off with a really lovely, almost subtle easing into the story, and sound plays a big role in the opening of the film. As we meet our hero, can you tell us just a little bit about that opening sequence and kind of how you approached it from a mix perspective, knowing where you had to go at the end?
Absolutely. I had 100 tracks of bugs. These guys all had awesome sound design. I had bugs, lots of bugs. I was just trying to, paint the picture of the rural South. Lots of bugs, lots of air, and we use bug layers to make tension. And we start off not exactly knowing what's going on at all. We're just following a guy on a bicycle who's listening to music, and then all of a sudden, wham! He falls off the bike because he got hit back up. Choosing when to play bugs and when to play score, came in at that point. Obviously, score doesn't play well with bugs, so you have to find a place to cross all this kind of stuff and do it subtly so that people don't realize it.
Throughout the movie, cop sounds play a kind of a pervasive atmospheric role. We got radios, we got a bunch of kind of that stuff going on. Sirens, Foley work is extraordinary in this film. The clank of all the metallic cop paraphernalia. But considering that they're not the sound, that they're not the good guys in the film, I'm kind of curious what, you almost use the sound to kind of reinforce the ominousness of the police and to make them feel like an oppressive presence. And so I'm kind of curious about how you found that approach in the mix, and did you kind of go too far with it? Was there a little bit of experimentation to find that right balance?
Heavy feet is how you make a bad guy. You give him a little bit of a thump to his feet. I don't know that there's a lot of thought into, okay, this is a bad guy. What are his keys going to sound like versus the good guy? But there's definitely, a slower pace to some of these guys, a little bit more weight in their movement.
I think that's a great tip that I will now keep in mind for all film students, is like, the bad guys always sound heavier. Tell us a little bit about the music and sort of the integration of that, and then also just as a mixer, just the controlling the dynamics, because you obviously you can't be at 11 the whole time.
Well, we were in the room. It was quite loud, but yeah, you have to come down to the Netflix specs for streaming at some point. And yeah, you just you mix in the room to make the director happy, obviously, and then you try to take that mix and bring it down just a little bit so that when people are streaming at home, you're not completely chasing the level on the TV at home. And with the music, it was a beautiful score. And yeah, the hard part of that was, we just had to keep it down a lot so that we could still have the tension of the bugs and everything else. Just, subtle music, subtle bugs, subtle airs, just that made the tension of the film.
We were talking outside a little bit earlier. I've been around long enough in the business to remember, like, when I got started, TV people did TV and in the sound world, and feature film people did feature films, and there was a huge gap in the quality between the two, and the budgets. Certainly, I think there's still a big gap sometimes in the budgets. But obviously, as evidenced by our panel, we got a lot of feature film people who are doing streaming content, and the bar is certainly raised from a quality perspective. And I'm just kind of curious for each of you how you kind of navigate, because as we know, the budgets have not necessarily gone up to meet that, but the expectations have. So a question for you, Drew, but I'm for the panel in general, how do you kind of navigate those higher expectations with the resources that are available to you?
It's really hard. It's extremely hard to try to figure out what you have to let go and what you can't spend time on and what, needs time. Sometimes matching ADR is more important than putting in a bunch of sound design because you just don't have a lot of time. It's extremely difficult as a feature mixer to sit down and say, man, I have to let this go because we have to spend the time on the music or something else. It's tough. That's all I'll say is that, the budgets are getting smaller and the time is getting smaller, but the expectations from the clients are still huge. So it can be a struggle. It really can.
Anybody else want to opine on that one? Wylie, you got any thoughts on that?
You know what? I'm going to touch the third rail. So it's not tough. It just requires thought. It requires communication. Working on short films or long films. I mean, we're almost like medical professionals at some level. And when you're up to your elbows inside of somebody's chest, who do you care whether they're tall or short or male or female? I mean, we are, practitioners. We're artists. We're artisans. And I'm sure there's a bunch of our fellow artists and artisans in the group. Nobody wants it to be hard. They just want it to be perfect or beautiful or tortured or rhythmic or whatever. And these are just creative decisions at that point.
Let's end with a lightning round. I want to go down the list. Sometimes I love to end these conversations by just asking you, from a selfish perspective on your own show, what's your favorite sound moment? That when you're in a playback, something, it can be big or small, something that when it comes up as you're playing back just kind of fills you with a little sense of happiness deep in your soul, of a moment that you love in the sound work in your own show.
It's the laptop in episode 1, the reveal of what Jamie did. When you see it for the first time, we tried so many different things in that moment. We tried music, we tried sound design, we tried just loads of things, and the original idea was just the hum of the laptop, that the camera would move in and the laptop hum just very gently comes up and we just focus, and we went all the way around and back to it, and it really works, and really like it.
Honestly, it's actually at the end of episode 6. In terms of the music, Pete was very clear in that this was a harsh environment, no gentle textures, but explosions in the sky make such beautiful music. And so we had to hold up. We haven't earned it yet. But at the very end of the series, we finally get to be emotional and vulnerable and delicate. And so that was just the whole journey to that was such a payoff. And as someone who loves music and loves the music of Explosions in the Sky, it made total sense. And I'm glad that we built it the way we did. But that was just always gives me goosebumps every time.
My favorite sound is silence. And the reason for that is whatever comes next, your mind is completely attached to it. And so a lot of sound design is just playing head games with the audience. And silence is one of our best tools.
Generally speaking, if we do a playback for Tim, he's like, I only have a couple notes. That's my favorite sound. That's my favorite. So with this season of Love, Death, and Robots, I think Mini Aliens is 5 minutes long. I smile throughout the whole thing. And it's not just like the fact that it's silly and stuff. Like, I can tell you guys stories of how we got some of those sounds, and it's really silly. There's like Easter eggs all over that thing, and they asked for it too. So like, even if this little thing, someone like drops a box of sex toys, I have like a bzzz and a floppy and all that sort of stuff. So like, every single thing that happens in that episode, it makes me smile. I mean, we ended on a fart, so...
Can't go wrong.
There you go.
Drew, how about you?
Hard to follow that, but obviously the beginning of the movie when we expose the world for the first time, when he does get knocked off the bike is really cool. And then the tension scene where our hero takes the bad cop down, takes him hostage, and we just built the tension through the layers of bugs up until that happens. Those were my favorite moments.
Did you have to do an entire just bug pre-dub for this?
Oh, yeah, man. There were so many bugs.
That's amazing. Everyone, please give a round of applause to our great panel. Many thanks to James, Wylie, Anna, Brad, and Drew for joining us for today's panel discussion. And an extra special thanks to our friends at Netflix for putting this together and inviting me to moderate. Be sure to check out the incredible work from each of these shows in Dolby Atmos right now on Netflix. We'll have links, as always, in our show notes. And if you'd like even more conversations with artists and filmmakers about how they use technology to tell their stories, be sure you are subscribed to Dolby Creator Talks. You can find links to our show on all the major podcasting platforms, including the video version on YouTube, in our show notes. Or you can simply search for Dolby wherever you get your podcasts. If you're curious to know more about what we do at Dolby Creator Lab, head on over to dolbycreatorlab.com. There you'll find information about all of our programs. You can access the entire library of episodes of the show, and you can sign up for our mailing list. Until next time, this is Dolby Creator Talks. I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Our producer and editor is Michael Coleman. Our executive producers are Amanda Schneider and Jack Ferry, with additional editing by Matt Nixon. And our production coordinator is Karen Marroquin. Thanks for joining us.